I got this old quilt top a while back, and I don't even really remember where I found it. It might have been a thrift store. It could have even been eBay. Sometimes I'll go there to look for unfinished quilt tops that I can play with. But it's really fun to look at all the details on these to see how they were pieced together. I knew on this one, it just had some staining, some holes, some puckering, and I knew finishing it as a proper quilt was just not going to be really ideal, that it was going to be kind of tricky. So since I've already done that sweatshirt that I'll mention later in this video again, I thought it'd be fun to do something a little different, but just as fast. So I grabbed my trusty seam ripper that I am going to use a lot on this project. And as I got started, I was shocked by how strong this thread is. There are some holes in the quilt in spots, and I think it's so easy to assume that is a stitching problem. But I have found it is way more likely for it to be a fabric problem, that the fabrics wear out far more quickly than the stitching does. Not always, but it is a pretty common problem to have a certain fabric throughout a quilt become threadbare with time. And I don't know, it just surprised me as I was going through this. I was gonna try to kind of glide my seam ripper, and it is not gonna work. So back to my trusty picking a few at a time and seeing if I can kind of get it to come loose. But goodness, this thread is thick. So I've already made a quilt block sweatshirt with one of the blocks from this quilt, and I wanted to do something a little bit different this time around. Initially I was just gonna take a quilt block and put it onto a tote bag, like a pre-made tote that I'd picked up a long time ago. And as I was placing it on the tote bag, I realized I think I would actually like it better as a pocket. It just felt like it was going to be a little bit more versatile and useful even. I really love some good pockets. So you can kind of see a little sheen on the back of this quilt block from where I did a little bit of interfacing on it, thinking I was just going to like press it to the tote bag and sew around it. But you certainly don't need to add interfacing for a project like this. So what I've done is taken another accent fabric, cut it a little larger than my block, and I'm going to pin these right sides together so that when I take it over to the machine, I can sew them together and then turn it back out and create a fun little pocket with the block on the outside, showing off on the tote, and then some fun fabric on the inside. Here I'm placing pins on the bottom that are going to remind me where to start and stop. Sometimes it's fun to even use like a red color or something that reminds you, do not sew past this point. So anyways, I'm going to take it over, I'm going to sew all the way around, and we'll come right back. All right, so here it is. I'm going to take out my pins. And at this point, you can see those edges are wider than my block. And when you turn it inside out, you do not want any extra bulk on the edges, any more than you really need, than is required from just the seams. So I am going to spin it around and just trim 1/4 inch away from that stitching line, just all the way around it. And I like doing this better than measuring a quilt block and getting an exact measurement for that lining, the pocket lining. It just feels faster. I feel like I have to do this step anyways, so may as well do it at the end when you are cleaning it all up. Okay, so here's the opening. I'm going to kind of test and see, do I need to trim those corners? Is it going to be too bulky? I feel like it is. So when you're trimming a corner like this, you're trimming at just like a 45-degree angle, and you just want to make sure you don't go through that little line you've sewn, the seam. And then I'll take it and kind of turn it all inside out. Okay, so I've got it all turned out. I kind of like to check and make sure the edges are all fully enclosed. Everything's looking good. Here I'm using my wool pressing mat. Now you can't just put a wool mat down on a cutting mat and press. It will ruin your cutting mat. So that's not actually what I'm doing here. You might have seen I have an old cutting mat that I'm using really just for filming purposes. It's just a lot easier to show you this way. But it's going underneath my wool pressing mat, and I'm going to give it all a good press and make it nice and crisp before I sew it to my tote bag. At the opening, you're going to just press those fabrics, the lining and the block, a 1/4 inch in, so that when you go to sew it down to your tote bag, you have a nice clean edge right there. So I'm just going to keep pressing those in and make sure it's nice and neat, and then I'll actually pin it down to make sure it's going to stay still. Here's my fun yellow tote bag. I've marked the center by just folding it in half both ways. I probably should have shown you that, but it's pretty self-explanatory. I think I picked this one up at Hobby Lobby, like I don't even know when. I do this. I come up with ideas and then I squirrel it away and then don't get back to it. So I'm showing you here, I'm going to sew just right along the edges of the sides and the bottom of this quilt block. I like to pin in place. Now make sure you're only pinning through the block, pocket, and the tote bag. The front side of the tote bag. Do not sew through the back side because then you won't be able to use your tote bag. So yeah, just take time, put your hand inside, do whatever you need to do to like make sure you're only going through the correct number of layers, and just pin it down as much as you feel like you need. And here's my bag. I cannot tell you how much I love this project. It was so fun. Even pulling all the blocks apart was super fun. And I have loved using this bag. I already have multiple stains on it from using it so much, but it's just such a good go-to, fun, slightly quilty project that I can take out and stuff all my junk in everywhere I'm going. It's great.